This week's assignment is going to be to composite full CG material and remix lighting passes to create a convincing result. Now, before we can talk about compositing render passes or layers and passes together, we kind of first have to understand how layers and passes work in practice. So right now I'm in Modo, and we're going to look at how light relates to compositing. So I have a very simple scene here. It's just a head with a 3-point lighting setup, which is the most basic sort of studio lighting setup you can have. I'm going to turn on lights one at a time, and we're going to look at the results. So first I'm going to turn on the key light. So this is the key light, or what would normally be called the main light in a scene. And you can see it's just one light, and it's obvious that there's only one light coming from the left-hand side here. I'm going to turn on the rim light, which is the backlight that lights up the head. And you'll see the effect that happened when I turned on an additional light is that the light simply added into the scene. There's no magic, there's no mystery. One more light is like turning on a switch to flip on another light, and another light adds into the scene. I'm going to go one further and do the fill light. Same thing. Fill light adds into the scene. So the same exact logic extends to compositing lighting passes together. There is no special math involved. You're simply adding one light to the next in the composite. So we use a plus merge mode to do that. Let's jump into Nuke and see how this works in Nuke. So here I have Gary, which is our AOV lighting example, and I have a key light for him. I have a specular pass, which also adds on. I'll show you how to composite that. And a fill. And a glow for the eyes. So Gary's lighting setup is actually simpler than the 3-point lighting setup, because really all we have is key and fill. We have no rim light because he's backlit, and because he's in an exterior plate that looks like this, it doesn't have a 3-point lighting scenario. It has a basic key and fill. So let's start getting to work here, putting Gary into the plate. The other thing that we'll look at is compositing in his shadows, because we're going to have to put in his shadows to the ground because there's no shadow in the plate. And then we also have this ambient occlusion pass, which will knock out some of the stuff in his fill pass, which might be a little bit too ambient or too bright. So the first thing to do is to figure out if the image is in an unpremultiplied state or a premultiplied state, because you can't start adding together light AOVs unless the images are in an unpremultiplied state. Because if you remember, once the image has been premultiplied by the alpha channel, it's like the alpha channel and the RGB channels are married together. You cannot edit one or the other independently. So this ambient pass looks as if it's already in an unpremultiplied state. The key pass seems to be in an unpremultiplied state, and it doesn't have an alpha built in either. It looks to me as if the alpha is, yes, the alpha is built into this mega AOV output, which has the ambient occlusion and his shadow passes and his alpha built in. So these passes are already all unpremultiplied. Looks like this one is also. And then the alpha channel is coming in through this set of RGB mats. So this is going to be pretty easy. All we need to do is start adding these together. Now, this is the ambient pass, or the sort of general environment pass. We have the pass also for his ambient occlusion. So let's use that to knock some of this out, especially for the inside of his mouth, so his mouth isn't so glowy inside. So I'm going to drop down a grade node here and attach its mask input to this AOV shad contact alpha pass. And I'm going to use the red channel, which seems to be the channel that's creating the ambient occlusion. And I'm going to use that to simply multiply it by the ambient occlusion. And it looks like it's inverted, so I will invert it. There we go. So now it's darkening his more recessed areas, the areas between the snakes on Medusa's head and the crusty details in the inside of his mouth. All these details here. It's occluding the ambient light by multiplying it by that AOV. So now I have something that is hopefully more of an approximation of a correct ambient lighting solution. So this makes it like his fill light, and I have his key. To add two lights together, you simply add them together. So I'm going to do a merge add. I'm going to select the two nodes I like to do and do plus is the name of the add in Nuke. Specular passes also add. So I'm going to select the two, type plus, tab plus, and I have that. The glows for Medusa's eyes are maybe a special case here. I don't want to add them on until after I've done my pre-multiplication, because if I do, then the pre-multiplication will cut her eye glows off. So I'm going to save her eye glows for later. So let's take a look at Gary, and let's bring his alpha channel over. So I'm going to hit K for copy, and I'm going to copy the alpha channel from this input, from the ambient occlusion, shadow, contact, and alpha. I'm going to copy the alpha to the alpha here. And then I'm going to pre-multiply this. And we have a nicely pre-multiplied foreground. The background's already been formatted to the correct format with Gary, so I'm just going to do a merge over. Now, I'm not sure yet if the lighting ratios are just right. I'm going to save it until I've gotten the shadows in, because I have a feeling that by looking at all this bright ground, it's going to corrupt my perception of the brightness, the overall brightness of the scene. Like, I don't know how much light would be bouncing back up on Gary's belly here, chest area, until I've gotten the shadow in and I get a sense of how much light could possibly be bouncing back at him. So let's start getting the shadow in.